Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world where love is cold, silent, and a little bit moldy. You're walking a path worn down by the feet of poets and widows, down through the soft belly of the earth, past roots that once fed orchards and now feed only memory. The air grows still, warmer, then cooler again. You don't need a guide, you know the way. Everyone does, eventually. You're going to the underworld, not for punishment, not even for closure. You're here for the lovers, the ones who stayed, the ones who left, the ones who turned into trees, herbs, and forgotten songs. You won't find roses blooming here, just poplar leaves whispering when they shouldn't. You won't find Cupid flitting about, just shadows that lean in too close when no one's watching. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you hear is the splash of oars. Charon isn't speaking. He doesn't have to. His job doesn't require small talk, and frankly, he's heard too many mortal complaints to care. You sit in the boat, knees drawn up the river mist curling over your shoulders. It smells like old iron and something sour like dried tears or an apple that's been weeping in a drawer. No one tells you what to do here. No announcements, no maps. Just the slow push of water as the boat glides through the dark, cutting across the river's Styx. Like a whisper, someone regretted saying. You ask if this is your stop. Charon doesn't answer. He just jabs his oar toward the shore, where a set of stairs curls up and around a black stone archway. You take the hint. The first steps are sticky. You don't know why. Best not to ask. But once your feet find steady ground, you notice how different the underworld is from what you've been told. There are no flames, no screams, just quiet. Not silence. That would be merciful. This is the kind of quiet that hums under your skin. The kind that sounds like someone waiting just outside the room. The kind that makes your memories speak louder than your thoughts. You pass a low arch where names are carved not in marble but in dirt. If you breathe too hard, they'll vanish, which feels accurate. You're walking now through the fields of asphodel. Most souls here aren't wicked or holy, just done. This is the place for those who weren't particularly good or bad, just human, mildly disappointing in both directions. And the smell, it's like someone crushed ghost flowers underfoot and then forgot why they did it. There are lovers here, not holding hands, just existing in parallel. You pass a couple sitting 6 feet apart on identical stone benches, both staring into different directions. You sense they were once everything to each other. Now they're nothing with remarkable symmetry. You wonder, is love in the underworld a punishment, or just aversion with the color drained? Historians still argue whether the Greek underworld was a metaphor for moral consequence, or simply a narrative device for explaining grief. Some say Hades was cruel. Others say he was just thorough, a bureaucrat with a heart 2 sizes too calcified. You'll decide for yourself soon enough. For now, keep walking. You pass another couple, only they're not a couple. One is flesh, one is dust. The living woman whispers something to the crumbling statue. He does not reply, but you think maybe he heard. There is no currency here for love, no flowers, no chocolates, just gestures carved into myth and memory. Somewhere nearby, a nymph sighs. It sounds like leaves folding in on themselves. You haven't met the queen yet, but you feel her, the shift in air, the faint vibration underfoot, the quiet decision that you're no longer entirely alone. You are in the land of Hades, but you're walking toward the women who made him a god worth remembering. Your footsteps slow as the underworld narrows. The wide, echoing paths of the asphodel fields give way to a corridor lined with polished obsidian walls so dark they reflect nothing. You think you're alone until you notice a figure already waiting for you. She doesn't rise to greet you. She doesn't need to. Persephone. She's seated on a black throne carved from the roots of a tree that doesn't grow anymore. Her posture is perfect. Her expression not stern exactly, but practiced. Like someone who's learned how to feel things without letting them show on her face. You've seen paintings of her, bright spring maidens, arms full of daisies. This isn't that Persephone. Her hair is braided tightly down her back. Her dress is deep plum hemmed in ash. The crown on her head is iron, but thin, as if she forged it from needles. She looks at you the way a chess player watches an opponent's first move. You're not lost, she says. You came looking. You nod. She gestures to the stone bench beside her. You sit, and then, slowly, she speaks. They always start with the same question, she says. Did you want to come here? You wait, and the answer is always the same. It depends who's asking. You smile despite yourself. Persephone's myth is famous. Hades saw her picking flowers, fell in love, and abducted her into the underworld. Her mother, Demeter, despaired. The earth went barren. A deal was struck. Persephone could return to the surface for part of the year, 6 months of light, 6 months of dark. Simple enough. But historians still argue about the story's deeper meaning. Was it really abduction, or was it initiation? A metaphor for womanhood, for seasons, for cycles. Some fringe scholars even claim Persephone chose the underworld, that the version where she eats the pomegranate seeds is not a curse, but a contract, that she stayed on purpose. You ask her now gently, did she? She leans back, staring at nothing. There was no throne for me up there, she says. Only petals. Expectations. You don't speak, you don't need to. They wanted me to bloom forever, she continues. No one asked if I wanted to wither. There's a quiet kind of strength in her voice, not defiance, just fatigue that's been organized into resolve. Hades didn't ask for my love, she adds. He asked for my presence, that was enough. You imagine what that must have felt like to be chosen not for beauty or purity, but for being. To be named queen, not after a wedding, but after descending. Still, you can't help but ask, was there any love? She closes her eyes. Eventually, she whispers, but not in the way poets want. Love in the underworld, she explains, is not made of warmth or hunger or wild declarations. It's made of stillness, of keeping your word, of letting someone leave without following, of listening when no one is speaking. Persephone places her hand on the armrest of her throne. You notice the soft dust collected in the grooves. I learned to rule before I learned to love, she says. And by the time I did both, I had forgotten how to belong to anyone. There is a line in a forgotten hymn, an obscure fragment carved into a hillside near Eleusis that names Persephone, not as wife, but as boundary. The line between death and life. The hinge on which the year turns, and maybe that's what she is. Not the lost girl, not the bride, just the space between. She stands now, and the dust swirls slightly at her feet. She walks toward the darkness, not looking back. She doesn't need to. You remain behind, still on the bench, not waiting for her, just understanding her a little more than before. And perhaps that's all anyone ever truly gets from a queen of the dead. The bench is still warm where Persephone sat, though the queen herself has long since vanished into a corridor of hanging roots. You linger there, longer than necessary, staring at the place her hand rested, not because you expect her to return, but because for a moment the underworld didn't feel quite so lonely. Now it does again. You rise. Your footsteps echo strangely now, louder than before, as if the underworld is taking note of your direction. You walk past a low, sloped wall, engraved with countless small circles. Some have lines carved through them. Some are blank. Some are filled with tiny, jagged teeth marks, pomegranate seeds. You follow them like breadcrumbs until you find a small table in the shadows. There in the center sits the fruit, the pomegranate. Its skin has cracked slightly from age, and a few ruby seeds have spilled across the stone. They glisten as if just bitten, as if they might bleed. You crouch beside them and wonder what Persephone must have thought when they offered her that first seed. Was it hunger temptation, or did she already know what it would cost? There are many versions. Some say Hades tricked her, slipped the seeds into her mouth while she slept. Others claim she reached for them herself, eyes open, unafraid. Historians still argue whether it was a violation or a choice, whether it was mythologized consent or just a poetic metaphor for growing up. You pick one seed up. It's heavier than it looks. It smells faintly of rust and salt, like the ocean caught in a bruise. You don't eat it, but you place it in your pocket, because some things aren't for tasting. Some are for carrying. Above you, a vine shifts. You hadn't noticed it before. It's wound along the ceiling like a sleeping serpent, thorns tucked tightly inward. Its flowers are skeletal, almost translucent. They're made from memories. That's the only way to describe it. Each bloom seems to hum with a fragment, a laughter cut short, a name whispered, once, then never again, the warmth of hands that no longer touch. These aren't Persephone's flowers. These are Demeter's. Her grief grows in the dark, like ivy through a ruined house. You remember the story again. After her daughter was taken, Demeter wandered the earth unwashed and wild, refusing to let anything grow. She found no comfort among gods. She found no peace in temples. Her pain became policy. It's one of the few myths where grief has teeth. There's a temple in Eleusis, long crumbled, where pilgrims once gathered to seek her mysteries. They fasted. They walked barefoot. They whispered her name into cracked bowls and poured milk into the soil. They prayed not for blessings, but for understanding, for permission to hurt the way she did. Demeter, too, loved Persephone, but hers was the love of clinging of rain that would not stop. Yours, maybe, is a quieter kind. You pass a mural etched faintly into the wall. It shows the famous moment, the compromise. Persephone standing between two realms, her face divided by shadow. On one side the sun blazes. On the other, ash drifts from a colorless sky. She holds the fruit in both hands. Neither side looks like home. You keep walking. Eventually, you reach a second throne, smaller, cruder, less ornate. This is Hades's, but it's empty. Instead, someone else is here. A servant. No, not quite. An old woman sits nearby, hunched over a bowl of seeds. She doesn't speak. She doesn't even blink. You sit beside her, and for a long time you simply listen to her breathing. Slow, mechanical, like the rise and fall of wheat in a forgotten wind. Finally, she turns to you. Her eyes are clouded but clear. She was never meant to stay forever, she says. You don't know who she means, but you nod anyway. The woman smiles. Her teeth are made of bone, but not her own. You feel a chill. Still, you don't run. You ask if she ever met Persephone before the Underworld. Of course, she says. Everyone meets her once. You're quiet. She isn't just a queen, the woman continues. She's a door. You think about that. How certain people become passageways. How some loves aren't meant to be held, only walked through. You think about how some stories are not warnings or triumphs, but turns, inward, downward. You ask her what the seeds taste like. She doesn't answer. She simply exhales a single word, memory, and then she vanishes. The bowl tips. The seeds scatter. You don't try to catch them. Some memories aren't meant to be preserved, just noticed. You stand again. Your legs feel heavier, but your steps are still yours. You pass under another arch, this one carved from petrified rose stems. No thorns, just curves. At the center, an empty niche where a torch might have once burned, but the flame's gone. You realize now you're in a place that doesn't seek redemption, only ritual. The rhythms of return. Up there, people talk about forgiveness. Down here, they talk about balance. 6 seeds, 6 months, a life split, not by years, but by longing. You wonder, does Persephone count them, or has she forgotten the number? And if so, who remembers for her? You pause. There's something you need to do. You reach into your pocket, take out the single seed you kept, and gently you place it on the stone ledge, not as a gift, not as an offering, but as a note, to say I listened, to say you are still here, to say I understand. As you turn away, you hear nothing, but somehow the silence feels lighter, like it just took a breath. You're walking again, but now the underworld feels different. Less like a place you entered, more like a thought you can't unthink. The path curves in soft arcs, like a spiral seashell. There's no destination, not really. Just layers of story, of sorrow, of time. And the next layer belongs to Hades, not the fiery tyrant Hollywood made him out to be, not the pitchfork-carrying villain in animated musicals. The real one, quiet, formal, and a little awkward at parties. A god who didn't choose his kingdom, but kept it immaculately tidy once it was assigned. You find his presence before you find his form. There's a room square, dimly lit by a soft gray glow that doesn't come from fire. It's just there, as if the walls themselves decided to emit light out of politeness. And in the center alone sits Hades, not on a throne this time, just on a flat stone elbows, resting on knees, hands folded loosely, watching someone sleep. Persephone. She lies curled on a chaise of dark velvet moss, one arm tucked under her cheek. Not regal, not posed, just human. Tired. He doesn't notice you at first. Or maybe he does, and just doesn't care. You don't speak. You sit at the edge of the room like a stagehand watching the final act of a play that's been running forever. And Hades, he does nothing. That's the remarkable part. He doesn't stroke her hair, doesn't kiss her brow, doesn't whisper sweet nothings into the dark. He just watches, as if presence is enough, as if this is all he's ever wanted, to witness her rest without being told to leave. There's an old vase fragment in the Louvre depicting this scene. Persephone asleep, Hades seated beside her, a pomegranate balanced on his knee. Scholars long believed it was symbolic of death's vigilance. Others now suggest something gentler, longing without demand. Hades has always been a paradox, feared yet dutiful, distant yet intimate. He rarely leaves the underworld, but he also rarely commands. That's Persephone's job now. He doesn't envy her. He admires her, and that's why he watches, not out of control or hunger or jealousy, but because it's the one thing he can do for her that doesn't ask for anything in return. You notice something odd. In his hands, an object he's been rolling back and forth between his palms. At first, you think it's a stone, but no, it's a dried flower. Mint, crisp, browned, crumbling slightly. He stops rolling it, places it down. You realize it wasn't for Persephone. It was a memory of someone else. Hades stands now, gently adjusts the fabric draped over Persephone's shoulder, and leaves the room. He doesn't tell you to follow, but you do, because you're no longer just an observer. You're a thread, and threads get tugged. The hallway he takes you down smells of old rain, and there, tucked behind a veil of roots and dust, a new chamber, smaller, fragrant, filled with mint. You didn't expect a garden here, but that's what it is. Rows and rows of curled leaves, fresh and wild, despite the gloom, and in the middle, a single stone, unmarked, but you know who it belongs to. Minthe, the nymph Hades once favored, before Persephone, before everything. You've heard the tale, maybe even dismissed it. A nymph falls in love with the god of the underworld. He returns her affections, or at least doesn't stop them. Persephone finds out, transforms her into a plant. A cautionary tale, a metaphor for feminine jealousy, or something else entirely. Historians still argue whether Minthe ever existed as more than a story to explain the scent of crushed leaves. But Hades believes she was real. You see it in the way he touches the garden, like brushing hair no longer there. You ask him quietly what she meant to him. He doesn't answer. Instead, he says something stranger. "She never asked me to love her," he murmurs, "only to remember." You wonder if Persephone knows he keeps this space. You wonder if it matters. Perhaps the underworld isn't about possession. Perhaps it's about memory. Everyone here, every shadow, every name, every withered root is a memory someone refused to bury properly. That's what love becomes here. Not warmth, not rescue, just refusal to forget. Hades kneels beside a patch of mint, plucks a few leaves, crushes them gently between his fingers. The scent rises a burst of green in a land without sky. He offers one to you. You take it, hold it close. And now, just like the pomegranate seed, you carry something that once was loved. That still is. You walk back in silence. This time with Hades, not as equals, not as companions, but as two beings who have watched someone sleep and didn't interrupt, which in this world might be the purest form of affection. He leaves you at a fork in the corridor. You don't look back. You've learned by now. Down here it's best if no one does. You take the right path at the fork, not because you're told to, but because something in the air leans that way. The mint leaf Hades gave you still lingers on your fingertips. Every few steps, the scent rises like a forgotten memory, delicate and sharp, then vanishes again into the underground hush. This part of the underworld feels less structured. The walls aren't carved or adorned. They just are, worn smooth by the passage of no one in particular. You feel like you're walking through someone's memory rather than a hallway, fragmented, unlit, a little out of order. And then, faintly, music. Not beautiful, not polished, but persistent. A low, wandering melody, like someone half remembering a lullaby they once played for a ghost. You follow it and find him. Orpheus. He's sitting at the edge of a dry stream bed, his lyre beside him. Not playing it, just staring at it, like it might bite him if he touches it the wrong way. You hesitate, thinking maybe you should wait for him to acknowledge you. But he doesn't. So you sit a few feet away, quiet, present. This is how it starts. This is how most things start down here. Eventually, he speaks. Not to you, not really. Just into the air, like he's trying to convince himself he still exists. I thought the strings would break, he murmurs, when I crossed the river. But they didn't. That felt like a sign. You nod, though he still hasn't looked at you. They said no one could bring back the dead, he continues. But I thought I sang to the rocks and they wept. I sang to the trees and they leaned in. Surely death could be persuaded. There's an old fragment from Hesiod, barely legible, scratched onto a shard of clay, somewhere in the ruins of Boeotia. It says, "Even silence bends for Orpheus." Most scholars dismiss it as poetic exaggeration. But you wonder, sitting here now, whether it might be the truest thing ever written. Because you hear it, that silence, and it's holding its breath for him. You ask softly if he regrets it, the journey, the choice, the turning. He doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he picks up the lyre, runs his fingers gently across the strings. No sound, just the dry rasp of calloused fingertips on tensioned gut. She wasn't behind me, he says finally, and now he looks at you. She was never behind me. You blink. Wait. Wasn't that the point? That he turned too soon? That if he had waited a few more steps, Eurydice would have been free? He smiles, tired and bitter. That's what they say, that I ruined it. He plucks a string, a low note rings out, hollow. But you didn't see her, not once, not the whole way up, not even a shadow, not even the sound of her breath, just the promise, just the hope. And hope's a liar when you're alone. You want to argue, want to say maybe she was there. Maybe he just missed her. Maybe the gods were testing him. But even as you think it, the words feel useless, because he already knows. Because that's what broke him. Not the loss, the uncertainty. There's a detail in one of the older versions of the myth, mostly ignored in modern retellings. In that telling, Eurydice never speaks. Not once. From death to return to vanishing, she says nothing. She doesn't scream when she disappears, doesn't call out. She just isn't. Some interpret it as tragedy, others as mercy. Historians still argue whether her silence was part of the curse or something she chose. Whether Orpheus lost her because he couldn't trust or because he wasn't meant to win. You ask him now what he would have done differently. He laughs, a soft, choking sound. I would have sung to her before she died, he says, then quieter. I would have listened more. You nod. It's always the same lesson, isn't it? Love louder, soften sooner. But this is the underworld. Here, the lessons arrive too late. He sets down the lyre again, looks up at the dark ceiling, where no stars ever shine, where no winds ever move. She isn't here, he says. You tilt your head. Eurydice. He nods. I've looked, I've asked, I've sung to every shadow. But she didn't return to the fields. She didn't become mist. She didn't even become a story. You feel the chill of that realization, the kind that comes not from absence, but from the suspicion that absence has purpose. You ask if he'll leave. He shrugs. There's nowhere else. You sit in silence for a long time, and then, so faintly you almost miss it, he begins to hum. A broken tune, familiar, but never quite complete. You listen, because maybe that's all he needed. Not salvation, just company, not a chorus. Just one person who didn't ask him to play the whole thing again. You reach into your pocket. You forgot it was still there. The crushed mint leaf Hades gave you. You offer it to Orpheus. He takes it, breathes in the scent, and something in his shoulders loosens. Thank you, he says. And then he sings. Just a few lines. Soft. Gentle. A lullaby for no one. Or maybe for you, or maybe for the girl he never truly saw. You stay with Orpheus until the song fades, not because he needs you to, but because leaving too quickly would feel like turning around. And you've learned how that ends. When you finally rise, he doesn't stop you, just nods once, like someone acknowledging a wave they'll never ride again. The lyre sits beside him, untouched now, and you get the feeling that someday the underworld will bury it in moss, and no one will remember the notes it once played. You walk on. The corridors twist tighter. The ground beneath your feet becomes rougher, cracked in places. You step over what might be ancient roots, or petrified bone, or something between the two. A low draft follows you, brushing your ankles like a cat that isn't sure if it wants to be fed or feared. And then another clearing. This one isn't a throne room. It's too open for that, and too still. But in the center stands a woman, tall, barefoot. Her dress is long black and clings to her like an oil spill, dense, glimmering, unnatural. You recognize her immediately. Hecate, the goddess of boundaries, of thresholds, of choices made in silence, of crossroads taken in the dark. She doesn't look at you, not at first. She's studying a lantern in her hands. It flickers with a pale blue flame, though there's no fuel, no wick. You don't speak. Not yet. This is one of the old ones. Older than Olympus. Older than rules. Finally, she turns. Her eyes are not unkind, but they are aware of everything. You walk like someone who Hasn't decided where they're going, she says. You shrug. I'm just passing through. She smiles faintly. Everyone says that. She steps aside, revealing 3 paths behind her. One straight ahead, one curving left, one dipping downward into something too dark to describe. You'll want the middle one, she says. Why? Because you'll think it's safe. You glance at the other 2. She continues. But you won't take it. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. You've come this far. Middle paths are for the living. You pause. Ask what's at the end of the left path. Remorse, she says. And the right reminders. Classic Hecate. Cryptic as a locked diary. You sigh, then step toward the right path. She doesn't stop you, but she follows. Not beside you, just behind, like a shadow that has its own thoughts. She tells you softly that most people down here ask about Eurydice, about Persephone, about the big names. No one ever asks about Iphigenia, she says. You pause. The name prickles. Iphigenia, daughter of Agamemnon, promised to marriage, offered to the gods, sacrificed for wind, because her father wanted to sail to Troy, because a goddess demanded blood, because the army wouldn't wait. Historians still argue whether she actually died or was saved at the last second and spirited away to serve Artemis. Some say she became a priestess. Others say she became a ghost. You ask Hecate which version is true. She chuckles. Truth doesn't live here. Only consequences. The path dips into a hollow now. And there, sitting alone on a ledge of worn stone, is Iphigenia. She looks young, but not innocent. There's no trembling, no tears, just a girl with her hands folded in her lap, eyes staring into a pool that doesn't reflect anything. You sit beside her. She doesn't move. I've counted the stars, she says suddenly, all the ones they think are gone. You glance up. There's no sky, just ceiling. You see stars, you ask? She nods. In the water, when I look long enough. She gestures at the pool. You lean in. Nothing, just shadow. She sighs. They only show up when I forget what I'm looking for. You ask her what she remembers most. She answers instantly. The wind. Not her father, not the knife, not the altar. The wind. It smelled like oranges, she says. We were close to the shore. The kind of breeze that dries your hair while you sleep. You feel your throat tighten. She doesn't cry. She doesn't seem like she ever has. She tells you how the gods demanded it, how her mother screamed, how the soldiers didn't meet her eyes, how her father called it necessary. There's a line scratched into a stone wall near the ruins of Mycenae, barely legible through moss and time. Better the sea than a blade. It's attributed to no one. Some say it was scrawled by a soldier who couldn't sleep. Others say it was her brother. You ask if she forgives him. She doesn't answer. Just flicks a pebble into the pool. No ripple. Forgiveness, she says, is for people who want to go back. You ask if she would, if she could. She shakes her head. They don't deserve my return. Her voice isn't angry, just finished. That's what's most startling. Not her pain, but her peace. She's beyond outrage, beyond longing, just settled. A girl who became a boundary, not by choice, but by history. You sit beside her for a while. Say nothing until Hecate speaks from behind. She's one of mine, she says. And you believe her because this girl is not a ghost, not a spirit, not a victim. She's a threshold between belief and betrayal, between the sea and the sword, and now between memory and forgetting. You rise. Iphigenia does not, but she nods once, almost imperceptibly, as if to say, you saw me. That's enough. As you walk away, you realize some stories aren't meant to be retold, just remembered. In silence, like the stars that only appear when you forget what you're looking for. You carry her silence with you. It clings like mist, seeps into the folds of your clothes, settles behind your ears. You feel slower now, like your bones remember something your brain has forgotten. The passage ahead narrows. Walls curve inward like ribs. The ceiling dips low enough you have to duck. You imagine being swallowed by a long-forgotten god, one who doesn't chew, just keeps you in its throat for a few centuries, letting you digest alongside myths no one tells anymore. The air is warmer here, damp, sour-sweet, like ripe fruit left in a closed room. You follow the sound of dripping water, and then suddenly you see her, Ariadne. She's reclining beside a broken fountain, moss-covered and gently steaming. The pool beneath it glows faintly, like it's remembering what light felt like. She's barefoot, her ankles crossed toes, lazily sketching circles in the mist above the water. You expect sadness. What you get is something else. Bitterness, perhaps. Or maybe clarity, sharpened by abandonment. Let me guess, she says, not looking at you. You're here for the tragic heroine tour. You raise your hands in mock surrender. She smirks. I'm not tragic, she continues, just poorly edited. You sit across from her on a cool stone. Say nothing. Ariadne, daughter of King Minos. She gave Theseus the thread that led him out of the labyrinth. She betrayed her father, her brother, her island. And for what? A guy in sandals who ghosted her on a beach. You ask if she still dreams of Naxos. Her smile fades. I don't dream anymore, she says. Not since he left. The myths say Theseus abandoned her. Some claim he was ordered to. Others argue Dionysus whisked her away before she woke. But none of those stories come from her mouth, only from his. Historians still argue whether Ariadne died of heartbreak, married a god, or founded a cult. You ask her, which was it? She sighs. All of them. None of them. Depends on who's telling it. She leans back on her elbows, eyes fixed on the dark curve of the cavern ceiling. I helped him. That's the part people skip. I helped him live. You nod. And he left, on a shore, with no goodbye, just sails shrinking into the sun. He said he'd marry me, she adds, voice sharp now. Said he'd build temples in my name, that I'd be a queen. She spits into the fountain. The water swallows it whole. I should have left him in the maze. You laugh before you can stop yourself. She glances over, smiles briefly. Everyone romanticizes the thread, she says. The clever trick, the way out. You ask her what it really was. She reaches into a pouch beside her and pulls out a coil of dried, crumbling fiber. Not golden, just twine, worn, frayed at the ends. He was already lost before he stepped inside, she murmurs. He just didn't know it yet. You wonder if she means the labyrinth or life. You ask if she misses him. She doesn't answer right away. Then I miss the version of me that believed him. The fountain gurgles. A pause swells between you. Then she sits up straighter, eyes narrowed. Do you know what it's like to give someone the map and watch them burn it? You don't. But you nod anyway. She studies you, then chuckles. You're better company than most. A beat, then softer. He looked back once, she says, when the sails were already up. Just once, like maybe he wanted to wave or apologize. Did he know? She says. He just kept going. There's a fringe theory never widely accepted that Ariadne orchestrated her own abandonment, that she knew Theseus would leave and helped him anyway, that she chose the beach, not as a victim, but as a beginning. You ask if that's true. Her mouth twitches. Maybe she says. But even beginnings are lonely at first. You reach into your pocket, find nothing. The mint leaf is long gone. The silence from Iphigenia is still folded inside your thoughts. You offer Ariadne what little you have presence. She accepts it with a nod. You'd be surprised how many ghosts don't want to talk, she says. They just want someone to stay. And so you stay. Not for long, just long enough. Before you rise, she tosses something to you. A piece of thread, frayed, but still strong. For the next one, she says, you thank her, walk on. The passage ahead splits again. You choose the darker one this time, not because you know where it leads, but because you don't. And maybe for once, that's reason enough. The tunnel you've chosen feels more like a vein than a hallway, narrow, pulsating gently, with echoes of a heartbeat that isn't yours. The thread in your hand twitches once, as if catching wind, though there's no breeze here. You think of Ariadne, and wonder if she's still watching. Probably not. Probably forgot you the moment you turned the corner. But the thread remembers. It knows the way, or at least it acts like it does. You trail it through curves so tight you brush both shoulders at once. Your breath shortens. The walls sweat. The rock smells of clay and iron, like a forge, long since cooled, still stained by fire. And then, space. Not a clearing, not a chamber, an absence. So vast and sudden that you pause at the threshold. Your feet scrape the edge of something not quite floor, not quite ledge. And down below, barely visible through the haze, stands a woman cloaked in midnight. Alcmene, the mother of Heracles, and a woman who has been both forgotten and blamed more than anyone you've met so far. She doesn't look up. She's sculpting something, clay. You descend carefully, the path barely wide enough for one hesitant foot at a time. When you reach her, she still hasn't acknowledged you. The sculpture is half-formed. A man's face, strong chin, crooked nose, eyelids shut as if already dreaming. You recognize him. Of course you do. Her son. You sit beside her. The silence is brittle. Finally, she speaks. I made him, she says, but he never belonged to me. Her voice is low, not mournful, just tired. You ask if she means Heracles. She nods once. They all wanted him, she continues. Zeus, Hera, the poets, the priests. Everyone had a claim. And you? She presses a thumb into the clay's cheek. I had the pain. There's a legend rarely told anymore that Zeus extended the night of Heracles' conception to last 3 times its normal length, that he disguised himself as Alcmene's husband, and she never knew until the child was born. Historians still argue whether Alcmene was deceived, complicit, or simply rewritten into a role convenient for the myths. You ask what she remembers. She exhales. I remember love that wasn't mine, a cradle I wasn't allowed to keep, and a story that used my name but forgot my voice. The sculpture's lips crumble slightly. She doesn't fix them. You ask why she keeps remaking his face. Alcmene looks at you now. Really looks. And you see it beneath the exhaustion, beneath the smudges of clay, a trace of something fierce. Because they keep changing it, she says. You ask who? The stories, the scribes, the marble cutters. One year, he's a killer. The next, he's a hero. Sometimes a drunk, sometimes a god. They never ask me what he was as a boy. You imagine Heracles, small, before the lion skin, before the labors, just a child, maybe laughing, maybe not. You ask what he was like then. Alcmene smiles small and sideways. He hated figs, she says, loved frogs, couldn't sleep without someone humming. A beat. I used to hum until my voice cracked. You wonder how often he heard her, how often he forgot. You ask if he visited her after, when he died. She shakes her head. No. He went to Olympus, right, because Heracles became a god, accepted among the stars, immortal, elevated, without her. You ask if she's proud. She turns back to the clay. No mother wants her child to die, proving he's worthy. You sit in that sentence for a long time. The sculpture crumbles again, this time at the brow. She doesn't fix it, just lets the dust fall. You ask her what she would say to him now if he walked through that tunnel. She thinks, then whispers, You could have stayed. Simple, brutal, true. In one version of the myth, never canonized, but whispered by some lesser poets, Heracles did return to her once. Briefly, cloaked, silent. He watched her sleep, then vanished again by dawn. Alcmene never speaks of it. Maybe because it didn't happen. Maybe because it did and it wasn't enough. You offer her the thread, the one from Ariadne. She doesn't take it. You'll need it more than I will, she says. And you believe her. Because Alcmene doesn't follow paths anymore. She builds her own. In clay. In memory. In fragments that erode but still refuse to disappear. You rise. She doesn't. She hums now so soft, you feel it more than hear it. And as you walk away, the sculpture collapses entirely. But she begins again. Because mothers rarely stop building the faces of their children, even after the world insists on chiseling them into someone else. You walk slower now. There's weight in your feet, not from the climb or the miles, but from the stories. They cling to your ankles like vines, gentle but unrelenting. The thread in your hand sags with dampness, though you've crossed no rivers. You don't question it anymore. Gravity works differently down here. The corridor ahead widens, not grandly, just enough for light, enough for space to breathe again, and enough for a statue. No pedestal, just a figure carved directly from the wall itself, stone giving birth to shape. Her arms are crossed, her eyes closed, and her head tilted as if listening for a sound that hasn't come in centuries. You know her face. They all do. Helen, of Troy, of Sparta, of poems and paintings and bad excuses. You don't speak. Not yet. The statue blinks. It's not stone, it never was. She exhales slowly like surf on a beach that's too tired to crash. You're early, she says. You ask what she means. I'm used to people arriving after the wars, she murmurs. After the fires. After the regret finally cools. You sit cross-legged at her feet. This close, she doesn't look like a goddess or a queen. Just someone who's been stared at too long. She studies you for a while, then tilts her head. Do I look like 1,000 ships to you? You smile. Shrug. Depends on the ship, really. She laughs once. A sound like breaking glass wrapped in silk. Clever, she says. That's how it always starts. She leans back against the wall. Not regal, not seductive. Just tired. There's a version of her story, one Homer skipped, where Helen never went to Troy, where she was taken to Egypt instead, and a phantom fought in her name. Some scholars claim it was metaphor. Others think it was a political rewrite. Historians still argue whether the real Helen even saw the war she supposedly caused. You ask her? She smirks. Sometimes I think I dreamed it. She picks up a handful of dust from the floor, lets it sift between her fingers. Men fought. Cities burned. and they named it after me. But none of them asked if I wanted to be the face of ruin. You ask what she did want. She looks up, away, then whispers, to choose. That's all. Not love, not peace. Just agency. Helen of Sparta, Helen of Troy. Never just Helen. I became a symbol, she says. And symbols don't get to rest. She tells you how every artist exaggerates her lips. Every bard polishes her sorrow. Every sculptor makes her look up, never down. You ask what she would change. She doesn't answer, just closes her eyes again. You realize she isn't waiting for visitors. She's waiting for silence, the kind that no longer whispers her name. You sit beside her, leaning your shoulder lightly against hers. She doesn't flinch, doesn't move, just breathes. And for a moment the weight in your feet lifts. Not gone, just lighter. You ask if anyone stays long. She shakes her head. They always leave back to their cities, their songs. And you, she opens one eye. I stay. Because if I leave, someone will rebuild me. You offer her the thread. She looks at it, smiles, almost kind. No, thank you, she says. I already unraveled. There's an old coin buried deep beneath the ruins of Troy. On one side, a profile that might be hers. On the other, a cracked line like a road leading nowhere. Archaeologists call it the Helen coin, but its origin is uncertain. Some say it was minted by a queen trying to erase the past. Others say it was cursed. Helen never mentions it, but she hums a tune now, low and sweet. You ask what it is. She shrugs. Something my mother sang before I had a name. The thread tugs softly in your hand. Time to move. You rise. She doesn't open her eyes, but she says, when you find the last one, tell her I stayed. You promise, even though you know you won't see her again. As you walk away, her voice follows you, faint fraying at the edges. She was the only one who never asked me why. You don't turn around, you don't ask who. Some names are better whispered by someone else, and some stories were never meant to be wars, only warnings. The corridor narrows once more, like the world is slowly wrapping you in gauze, urging you towards stillness. You don't resist. Your breath has taken on a rhythm slow, like waves, brushing against the hull of a boat. No one is steering. The thread in your hand glows faintly now, a pulse that matches your heartbeat, or maybe hers, or maybe someone else's, all together. You pass beneath an arch that seems more like a sigh than stone, and on the other side, you find her. She's sitting beneath a tree. Yes, a tree in the underworld. Its leaves are silver, not shiny, not metallic, just quiet. Each one shaped like a tongue, flat and knowing, and they flutter without wind. She sits with her knees tucked to her chest, chin resting on arms folded like worn pages. You know her from the posture alone. Psyche, not a goddess, not a warrior, Just a girl who loved, doubted, fell, and kept going. You approach. She doesn't look up. You're early, she murmurs. You chuckle. Funny. Helen said the same. Psyche smiles. It's small, tired, but real. They always say that. Time's different here. You sit beside her. The tree overhead doesn't offer shade so much as stillness, like it eats noise and swallows thoughts before they grow teeth. You ask if she's waiting for someone. She nods, then shakes her head. It's complicated. That's putting it mildly. Psyche, mortal girl, married in darkness to a god who forbade her from seeing his face. Tricked, betrayed, tested, burned by oil, cursed by Venus, given impossible tasks, and yet somehow loved. There's a tale that says she entered the underworld willingly, carrying a box from Persephone meant for Venus. Beauty in a bottle. A trap, of course. She almost didn't return. Historians still argue whether she died on that journey and was revived, or whether it was all metaphor for initiation, for rebirth. You ask her what it felt like. She exhales soft and sharp, like folding yourself inside a riddle and hoping someone still remembers the answer. You glance at the tree. Its branches hum faintly. You ask if this is her tree. She shrugs. It's where I go when I'm not sure who I am. And who are you today? She picks a leaf from the ground, holds it to the light. Someone who loved too much, or not enough. Depends who you ask. You tell her that she was brave. She smiles again. Bravery doesn't feel like the stories say. It feels like forgetting which part of you is still afraid. You ask about Eros. Did he come back? Did he wait? Did it end in reunion or distance? She plucks another leaf, lets it fall. He came, she says, and then she closes her eyes. I asked him to stay, and he did. You don't know whether to smile or ache. She opens her eyes, as if reading your silence. It wasn't perfect, she says, but it was ours. A pause, then she adds, until they made it into a myth. That hits you harder than expected. You realize the stories we're told don't age the way people do. They freeze characters in time, in roles, in lessons. But Psyche grew, and the myth never followed. She leans back against the tree, closes her eyes again. I'm tired of being the one who broke the rules, she whispers. Tired of being a symbol for faith or disobedience. I just wanted to know who he was. You ask if she regrets it. She doesn't answer, just hums a soft, repetitive tune. The kind you hum when you're too tired for words but not ready for sleep. You hand her the thread. She wraps it once around her finger, lets it dangle. Where did you get this? You tell her. Ariadne. Alcmene. Helen. She nods slowly. They all stayed, she says. You ask if she will too. I don't know, she says. Sometimes I dream of waking up. That surprises you. You sleep here. She nods. Of course. That's where I see him. You ask what he says. Nothing, she answers. Just holds my hand. There's a breeze now. The first you've felt in hours. It lifts a few silver leaves from the tree and carries them up, up, up into the dark, where maybe a sky used to be. You rise. The thread tightens slightly in your palm. Time to go. Psyche leans her head against the trunk, doesn't open her eyes, but as you step away, she murmurs, "Tell them I wasn't sorry." You pause. Ask, "For what?" She doesn't reply, but you understand. She wasn't sorry for lighting the lamp, for doubting, for choosing. And maybe that's what this whole place is, a resting ground not for villains or victims, but for women who chose and lived and were rewritten into something else. You keep walking, because someone still needs to hear their names, and maybe you're the one left holding the thread. The thread coils a little tighter now, as if it senses you've passed a threshold. The air is cooler again, still dry, but tinged with the scent of ash and myrrh. Not unpleasant, just old. You follow a staircase carved directly into the rock, each step worn and uneven, like it's been used for something besides feet, maybe prayers, maybe regret. At the bottom, the space opens not into a cavern or a room, but a sort of cloister. Arched ceilings stretch overhead like ribs, and in the middle stands a single column. Around it, nothing. No benches, no torches, no markings, and no sound. Until you hear her breathing. She's sitting against the column knees, drawn to her chest, long hair hiding her face. You don't need to see her eyes to know who she is. Medusa. You freeze. But she doesn't move. She's not stone, not now, not monstrous either. Just a woman, trying to breathe quietly in a world that refused her name. You step forward slowly. She doesn't react. Her snakes do. Tiny flicks like the movement of grass in windless heat, not threatening, just there. You sit beside her, careful not to crowd. The silence returns. This time it's thick, comfortable almost. Eventually, she speaks. "I don't want to be looked at anymore." The voice is low, soft, not what you expected. You nod. Say nothing. Let her choose the pace. After a while, she pulls her hair back. You're startled by the ordinariness of her expression. No fury, no venom. Just someone who has been told too many lies about who she is. "They always paint me in extremes," she murmurs. "Either a monster or a martyr." You ask if she remembers the temple. Her jaw tightens. "Yes," she says, "but not the way they tell it. There are versions, forgotten ones, that say Medusa was once a priestess of Athena. Beautiful, devoted, violated in the temple by Poseidon, then cursed by the goddess she served. Historians still argue whether Athena's punishment was mercy or malice, whether the transformation was a weapon or a warning. You ask which she believes. Medusa's smile is sharp. Belief is for people with options. She curls a strand of snake around one finger absently. "They said I turned men to stone," she continues, "but they were frozen long before they saw me." You sit with that for a moment. It feels true. She glances at you now, eyes not blazing, not vengeful, just tired. You're not afraid. You shrug. I don't think you're here to hurt anyone. She laughs once. Neither did I. A pause, then softer. But that's not how stories work, is it? They don't care what you meant, only what you symbolize. You offer her the thread. She lifts it, weighs it, then threads it between two fingers and hums, not a melody, just a vibration. You feel it in your ribs. Whose is this? You list the names. She nods at each. They stayed, she says. You nod. And you, she leans her head back against the column, lets her snake settle again. They say I died with my head in a bag, she whispers. But I was already gone by then. You ask where she went. Her smile fades. I don't know. But it wasn't Olympus. She stares up at the arches above. They used my image for their shields, my name to scare children, my story to crown their heroes. But not once did they ask what I wanted. You ask her now. She looks at you, and for a moment you're not afraid of turning to stone. You're afraid of forgetting. I wanted peace, she says, and a place no one could reach. A beat. I didn't get either. You sit with her for a long while. She hums again. The thread hums with her. Then she ties it loosely around the base of the column. A loop, not a knot. Something that can be undone. You ask what it means. She says, it's not my thread anymore. You thank her. She closes her eyes, says nothing more. And somehow in that silence you hear every scream she was never allowed to voice. You stand. Your steps echo up the stairs like gentle thunder. Behind you, the thread glows a little brighter, and you think, not for the first time, that maybe silence is where myths go to heal. You reach a crossroads, not metaphorically, an actual fork, two paths each, leading into a different flavor of dark. One is smooth and round, sloping like a lazy spiral. The other is jagged, descending sharply, with the harsh angles of a staircase built by someone who never planned to use it. You let the thread decide. It twitches toward the spiral, and so you go. The descent is slow, hypnotic. You begin to wonder if the spiral ever ends, or if you're simply circling the same moment over and over, like a memory with no beginning. But eventually, you arrive. The room is circular. No corners, no shadows. In the center stands a large pool, still reflective, perfectly round. Beside it sits a figure in white. She's not crying. She's not smiling. She's just waiting. And as soon as you see her hands folded in her lap, stained at the fingertips with something like ink or ash, you know, this is Iphigenia, daughter of Agamemnon, sister of Orestes, victim of sacrifice maybe, or survivor of a trick. Historians still argue whether she was truly killed at Aulis or saved at the last second by Artemis, whisked away to be a priestess in some distant land. You clear your throat softly. She looks up. No surprise in her eyes, only recognition. You're late, she says. You apologize. She waves it off. I've been early for centuries. She gestures to the pool. You glance down. The surface doesn't reflect your face. It reflects hers. Over and over. Young, older. Cloaked, naked. Crowned, bleeding. A dozen Iphigenias. All real, all false. You ask which one she is. She shrugs. Depends on the century. She dips her fingers into the pool. It ripples not outward, but inward, like it's pulling her in. You ask if she ever left Aulis. She pauses, then nods slowly. I think so. I remember waves, salt, a deer's eyes staring up from my own face. You blink. Ask her to explain. She doesn't. She just says, the gods don't save you. They rewrite you. You sit. Let that settle. You ask if she saw her father again, Agamemnon, the one who lured her with promises of marriage and gave her to the blade instead. She shakes her head. He died long before he bled. And her mother, Clytemnestra, a flash of steel in her gaze now. She remembered me. A beat. That's why she did it. You think of the legend how Clytemnestra murdered Agamemnon when he returned from war, still crowned with Troy's smoke because of Iphigenia, because of what was done. You ask if it was vengeance or justice. Iphigenia looks into the pool again. I don't think we ever knew the difference. The water darkens. You lean closer. For a moment you see Troy burning not as a story but as a home. Father's daughters' promises knives. And under it all, women being rewritten into myth. You hand her the thread. She touches it briefly. Is this Ariadne's? You nod. She always knew how to find the center. You ask if she wants to follow it. She considers, then tears off a tiny piece, just enough to tie around her wrist. I'll stay, she says, but I like knowing it's there. You ask what she's waiting for. She taps the pool, for the last Iphigenia to surface. And if she never does, then maybe I'll finally be just me. You rise. As you leave, you glance back. She's not alone. All the reflections still ripple like petals in a pond disturbed by memory. And in that moment you understand she wasn't the offering. She was the witness to her own erasure, to her rewriting, and now finally to her reclamation. You carry that with you as you climb back up the spiral, this sense that history doesn't forget because it remembers so many versions at once. The spiral deposits you into a hallway made of mirrors, not glass, something older, polished obsidian, smooth as breath, but impossibly dark. You don't see yourself. You see silhouettes, echoes, ghosts of choices you might have made. The thread doesn't lead straight anymore. It weaves back and forth, like it's trying to avoid something or someone. At the end of the corridor, you find her. She's sitting in a chair that isn't a throne, but might have been once. It's carved from blackwood, inlaid with mother of pearl, in shapes that seem to shift when you're not looking. She's older than the others, not in years, but in silence, the kind that settles over a place when no one visits for a long, long time. You recognize her. Of course you do. Hecuba, Queen of Troy, mother of 19, witness to the fall of everything she ever loved. You bow your head. She doesn't move. You wait. Still, she doesn't speak. Only when you sit across from her, your knees creaking slightly from the endless descent, does she lift her chin. You've seen them, she says. You nod. All of them. You pause. Most. Her mouth lifts in something like a smile. You're further than most ever get. You ask if she wants to tell her story. She huffs softly. My story. They already told it. In plays, in books, in that cursed horse. A pause. Do you know what it's like to see your city burn while they call it poetry? You shake your head. She leans forward. When they killed my sons, they gave them names. Heroes, even in death. When they killed my husband, they spoke of fate. But when they killed my daughter, she trails off, then finishes quietly. They called it background. You remember the myth. Polyxena, sacrificed on Achilles' tomb to satisfy the shade of a man who could no longer bleed. You ask if it was true, if it happened. Hecuba shrugs. Historians still argue whether Polyxena was real or symbolic, whether she was a person or just a final insult. You ask what Hecuba believes. I buried her, she says. Isn't that enough? The thread in your hand begins to hum again, faint, like a low drumbeat. Hecuba hears it. Her eyes narrow. Ariadne's, you nod, and the others. She reaches for it slowly, lets it wrap once around her palm, then pulls gently. You feel the tension shift. She always said the center held Hecuba, murmurs, but I watched it fall. You ask if anything survived. She looks around. The black wood, the obsidian, the silence. No, she says. But I did. You pause. You don't sound proud. She chuckles. It's hard to be proud when survival is the only thing they leave you. She stands now, not tall, but taller than grief. And she walks to the far wall. You follow. She places her hand against the obsidian, and it opens. Not a door, just possibility. I'm not staying, she says, but I won't go far. You ask where she'll go. To find my daughters, she says, the ones they turned into dust. You nod. Then offer her something you haven't yet given the others, a question. Do you want to be remembered? She doesn't answer at first. Then I want to be known. And with that, she steps through, not into light, not into shadow, just forward. The obsidian closes behind her. You're alone again, except not really, because now the mirrors show reflections, not yours, hers, over and over, walking, 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 not away, but toward. You press your hand to the wall. It's warm. And for the first time you wonder if the underworld is just a place where memory comes to finish what life refused to let it complete. The corridor shifts again, as if responding to something unspoken. Your footsteps make no sound now, like even the ground is holding its breath. The thread is quiet too, not slack, not taut, just waiting. You follow it into a chamber with no doors, no windows, only a well in the center. It's deep, bottomless, maybe. When you peer inside, the darkness doesn't reflect anything back. You sit at its edge, and after a while, someone else does too. You didn't see her enter. She's simply there, slim, young, hair like sea foam. You know her immediately. Nausicaa, the girl who found Odysseus washed ashore, the one who helped him, the one who let him go. She doesn't look at you. She tosses a pebble into the well. It doesn't make a sound when it lands. You wait. Eventually she speaks. I dream of him sometimes. You don't ask who. You don't have to. I dream he comes back, she says. But it's not the same man. Older, harder, smiling less. You nod. She tosses another pebble. I think people forget I wasn't the prize, she says. I wasn't the queen waiting on a throne. I was the one who helped him reach it. You ask if she regrets it. She smiles a little sadly. No. But it would have been nice to be more than a stepping stone. There's no bitterness in her voice, just the kind of ache that dulls over time. A scholar once wrote that Nausicaa was the most realistic woman in Homer, not because of what she did, but because of what she didn't get. She wasn't transformed or cursed or glorified, just remembered faintly as kind. You tell her that's not nothing. She looks at you now, and for a moment you see her, really see her, not as a side character, but as a person who chose to help a stranger for no reason other than compassion. I asked him to remember me, she says. Did he? She shrugs. I don't think he had room. Another pebble, another silence, then she turns to you. Do you think kindness ever echoes? You answer honestly. I think it's the only thing that does. She smiles again. This time it stays. You offer her the thread. She takes it, but not to keep. Instead, she lowers it into the well. It disappears. You panic just for a moment, but then she reels it back up, and tied to the end is a knot. Small, neat. Someone else down there, she whispers, still holding on. You wonder who. She shrugs. There's always one more story. You ask if she wants to follow. She shakes her head. I've walked enough shores. She reaches behind her and produces a folded piece of parchment. This is for him, she says. If you find him, you take it. She stands, brushes imaginary sand from her dress, then walks not into darkness, not into light, but into the space between, where forgotten names wait to bloom again. You hold the thread. It's warmer now, heavier too, because now it carries a letter and a legacy, not of war, not of prophecy, but of kindness. You tuck the letter into your pocket, though you're not quite sure pockets exist here. Still it stays. Maybe that's all that matters. The thread pulls gently now, more coaxing than commanding. You follow it, feeling the air change again, thicker, now almost damp, like the hush before a storm. or the breath of a hidden lake. It smells faintly of lavender and rust. The tunnel you're in tilts slightly downward, but in a comforting way, like a cradle being lowered towards sleep. You round one last corner, and there she is. She doesn't stand to greet you. She's seated in a garden. You blink. Because yes, this is a garden. Here, in the underworld. Vines creep across the ground in soft curls. Thornless roses bloom in colors you've never seen. Smoke, blue, bruised violet, a pink that hums. She's kneeling in the dirt, hands buried wrist deep. Digging, planting. It doesn't matter. You recognize her instantly. Persephone. Of course. She doesn't look up right away. You stand quietly at the garden's edge. And when she finally speaks, it's like dusk being poured into a cup. You found the others. You nod. She nods too. That's good. You ask if she's waiting. She exhales through her nose, half amusement, half exhaustion. I stopped waiting a long time ago. You ask if she's still queen. She glances around at the blooms, the vines, the roots she's coaxing into the soil. Does this look like a throne? You don't answer. She doesn't need one. Persephone, bride of Hades, child of spring, queen of shadow, taken or choosing, depending on who tells it. Historians still argue whether her myth is about abduction or agency, whether she ate the pomegranate to stay or to survive. You ask her that. She wipes her hands on her dress and looks you full in the face. I was starving, she says simply, and no one was offering bread. You swallow and nod. She gestures for you to sit, so you do, careful not to crush a pale flower growing where her shadow falls. Everyone thinks I'm trapped, she says, but they forget I have keys. You ask if she regrets coming here. No, she says, but I regret who they made me become. You hand her the thread. She smiles as if she's been expecting it. We've all held this at some point, she said. Most just forget to pass it on. She ties it to a root of the nearest vine. The thread glows a little, then vanishes, absorbed, maybe, or planted, like a seed. You ask what she just did. I gave it memory, she says. Now it'll grow on its own. You sit in silence, watching her dig. She moves gently, methodically, as though every inch of soil holds a secret. Maybe it does. You ask if Hades still comes. She stops, considers, then sometimes. You ask if she wants him to. Sometimes. She looks at you. You think love always ends in reunion, but sometimes it ends in quiet. You don't press. You just sit with her for what feels like hours. She doesn't tell you to go, but the garden begins to dim. Not in menace, just in rest. You rise. She remains kneeling. As you leave, she says almost absently, "Tell them we were more than the endings they gave us." You pause. Then say the words back to her. We were more than the endings they gave us. And somewhere behind the garden, you hear roots shifting, like the stories still growing, even down here, especially down here. The garden fades behind you, its warmth lingering like soft earth under fingernails. Your shoes, if they can be called that here, carry a little bit of that soil with them. You don't brush it off. The corridor ahead narrows more like a deer trail through fog than a real path. The thread doesn't guide so much as suggest now brushing gently against your wrist with each uncertain step. Eventually, you reach a door. Just a door. Wooden. Weathered. No handle. You knock once. It opens inward, and you step into a room lined with scrolls, loose pages, broken quills. There's a woman at a desk. Not young, not old. Her hair is pulled back with a ribbon that looks like it might have once been golden. Her fingers are stained with ink. There are bags under her eyes and a furrow between her brows so deep it could hold rainwater. She looks up. You're late, she says. You blink. She waves a hand. Kidding. Everyone's always on time down here. You smile cautiously. She doesn't return it. Let me guess you want to know who I am. You nod. She gestures to a scroll. You read the name. Phaedra. The syllables taste like bitterness and eucalyptus. You know the story, or at least a version. Wife of Theseus, stepmother of Hippolytus, caught in a lie that became a tragedy. You ask if she's writing her own ending. She raises an eyebrow. I'm writing all the endings, since no one else bothered. You glance at the piles around her. They look chaotic, but her hands move through them with confidence. What are they, you ask? She shrugs. Versions, drafts, mistakes, retellings, everything people think they know about me, and a few things they've never bothered to ask. You ask what she wants them to know. She taps the desk, that I wasn't the villain. A pause, that I wasn't the victim either. You sit. She keeps writing. You ask if she loved Hippolytus. She exhales. Historians still argue whether it was passion punishment or projection. But no one ever asked what it felt like. You ask her now. She stares at the ink on her fingers. Lonely, she says, like screaming into a closed book. She tosses you a page. It reads like a letter, not to a lover, but to a world that refused nuance. You ask if she regrets anything. She almost laughs. Everything. Nothing. Depends on the edit. You hand her the thread. She looks surprised, then amused. Took long enough. She knots it around the ribbon in her hair. Tell Ariadne, thanks, she says, for not cutting me out. You nod. And as you prepare to leave, she stops you. Wait. You turn. She hands you a small folded page. It's blank. You'll need this later. You ask what it's for. A new version, she says. Yours. You step back into the hallway. The door closes behind you. You glance at the page in your hand. Still blank. But somehow, humming. Like it already holds something sacred. Like maybe your story matters too. You carry the blank page in your hand for a long time. It warms slightly against your palm, as if aware of the words it has yet to contain. The corridor shifts again, widening into a tunnel that pulses faintly like breath. Not wind, not movement, just a sense of inhale and exhale, as if the underworld itself is quietly alive and listening. The thread doesn't lead this time. It trails behind you, no longer directing your steps. You're not being guided now. You're being watched. And sure enough, in the next room, someone is waiting. She's not seated. She's standing. Back straight, arms crossed, gaze so direct it knocks a little wind out of you. This is no maiden, no queen, no nymph with a tragic ending. This is Medea. And she's been expecting you. You feel it immediately, the pressure of presence. Her myth is not delicate. It's full of teeth and flame and arguments that still ignite entire classics departments. She doesn't blink as you approach. You came, she says, as if you owed her that. You nod. She looks around the room. It's stark. Bare walls. No tokens. Just one enormous tapestry hung behind her, woven in dark threads and glinting metallics. It shows ships and altars and children. Too many children. You ask her if she made it. She smiles, sharp, not sweet. Every thread, every knot. You step closer. The details are brutal, honest, the kind of honest that makes people uncomfortable. You reach for the thread on your wrist. She raises a hand. Don't offer it yet. You pause. She steps to the tapestry and brushes a hand over a small corner, almost tenderly. They only ever tell the ending, she murmurs. But I was a daughter first, then a sister, then a lover, then a mother. The crimes came last. You nod. You've heard the stories. Jason and the Golden Fleece. Betrayal. Exile. Filicide. Or maybe not. Historians still argue whether Medea truly killed her children, or whether the Athenians invented that ending to discredit a woman too powerful to contain. You ask her which version is true. She tilts her head. Which version do you need? It's not a riddle. It's a kindness disguised as a threat. You ask if she loved Jason. I gave him everything, she says. A pause. And then I took it back. You say you're sorry. She raises an eyebrow. For what? You don't have an answer. She steps forward and finally takes the thread. It glows faintly in her hand, turns a little red, like garnet, not blood, and then quiets. She doesn't tie it around her wrist. She presses it into the tapestry, and it vanishes, becoming part of the weave. You'll find the rest at the end, she says. You look at her. Of the story, no, she says. Of the thread. She gestures to the blank page in your hand. You'll need both. You hesitate, then ask, do you want to be remembered? She stares at you, then answers, I want to be believed. You nod. The room grows colder, not because she leaves, But because you do, the thread pulses again, humming softly now. It's leading you upward for the first time. You follow the thread upward, your feet rising on steps that weren't there before. Each one forms just in time beneath your soul's smooth, polished stone that vanishes once you pass. Like walking on the edge of memory. The light shifts. It's warmer now. Not sunlight, but something like it filtered through centuries of dust and forgotten hymns. You reach a landing, a balcony maybe. It overlooks nothing, just space. Endless open kind. She's there. You almost miss her. Because she's quiet. Still. Not a goddess, draped in radiance. Not a myth, carved in marble. Just a woman, seated on the floor, cross-legged, with a bundle of cloth in her lap. She hums. Not a song, a sound older than melody. It's Eurydice. You know it the moment she looks up. Her eyes are gentle, clear, not sad, not angry, just here. You sit beside her. She doesn't flinch. You don't speak at first. Neither does she. Because some stories can't be told out loud. Not right away. Finally, you ask, was it true? She smiles, a little crooked, that he looked back. You nod. She shrugs. Maybe. Do you blame him? She shakes her head. No. You wait. But she doesn't elaborate. So, you ask again, gently. Why? This time she lifts the bundle in her lap. It's soft, light, a scarf, a veil, no thread, a different kind, gold and black twisted, tight. I told him to trust, she says, but I didn't tell him how. You realize she's been holding her own version of the story all along. Different thread, same descent. Historians still argue, she says, whether I even wanted to leave. That stops you. She sees it. It's not that I didn't love him, she adds. It's just, I'd made peace here. I'd grown roots. You understand in a way that hurts quietly. Sometimes we move on, not because we must, but because staying would make others uncomfortable. You ask what happened after he left. Silence, she says, but not empty. She gestures outward, toward the space beyond the balcony. There's music here. You just have to stop listening for a song. You offer her the thread. She takes it carefully, braids it with her own, black, red, gold. Then she ties the braid around your wrist. Not hers, yours. You're carrying them now, she says, all of us. You look at it fragile, beautiful, stronger than it has any right to be. You ask if she wants to come. She smiles softly. I'm already where I belong. You rise. She doesn't. You turn to go, then pause. Was it love, you ask? Her answer is simple. It was real, and that's enough. You descend again, not into darkness, not into light, but into something shaped like closure. The braid at your wrist is warm. You don't touch it. You don't need to. Because now it pulses with more than one heartbeat. The path curves again. Not a descent this time, but a spiral that folds inward like the center of a shell. Each turn brings you closer though, to what you still don't know. The silence here is gentler, not empty, but padded, like snow on rooftops, like a library long after closing. You reach a doorway, low and rounded, the kind you have to bow slightly to enter, as if acknowledging something sacred. Inside, it smells of cedar and parchment and a hint of old sea salt. She's seated at a loom, hands moving slowly, steadily, not weaving for display, but for understanding. Ariadne. Of course, the one who began this journey. She doesn't look up right away, but you can feel her watching through the corner of her eye as though she's been expecting you for longer than time measures. So she says softly, "You made it through." You nod. She gestures to the stool beside her. You sit knees, brushing threads that dangle like vines. She passes you a shuttle. You take it instinctively, and just like that, you're weaving. She guides your hands only once, and then lets you work. You don't know the pattern, but your fingers do. Because every story you've gathered, Hecuba's defiance, Nausicaa's kindness, Persephone's quiet rule, Medea's flame, Eurydice's rooted peace, they live in you now. You're not making something new. You're giving form to what already exists. The braid on your wrist glows faintly as you work, warming with each motion. Ariadne hums as she weaves beside you. It's not a melody. It's a map. You realize that this loom doesn't produce cloth. It produces memory, a record, a rethreading. Historians still argue whether I was a victim or a traitor. She says, not bitterly, just tired. They forget that I was left behind twice. You pause. Theseus, she nods, and Dionysus, a slight smile. Even gods can grow distant. You want to say something comforting, but she doesn't ask for comfort, only company. So, you keep weaving. The shuttle moves faster now. The pattern grows intricate, interlocking waves, rising, vines' broken crowns, reformed as gardens. And then it stops. Ariadne ties off the thread with a knot so small it feels like a whisper. She places the tapestry in your hands. It's not large, but it holds everything. Not perfectly, but truly. Take it to the surface, she says. You ask how. She points. A ladder, made of thread. Every strand a story. You step to it, tapestry cradled in your arms, like a sleeping child. One foot, then another. Ariadne doesn't follow. She waves you upward, and just before you rise fully out of view, she says, "Tell them, we were never forgotten. Just misread." You nod and begin to climb. The thread holds, because it always does, especially when it's tied to the truth. You climb, not quickly, not fearfully, with the slow certainty of someone who has finally learned the shape of stories and how often they turn, then turn again. Each rung of the thread ladder is warm beneath your fingers, humming with memory. The further you ascend, the more you hear faint echoes of voices, laughter tucked into forgotten lines, names whispered like lullabies in languages older than stone. And then, at last, your hand finds air, real air, not scented with myth or shadow, but clean, still, the kind that carries dew and silence in equal measure. You step onto solid ground, grass beneath your feet, real grass. The sky above is early twilight, still blue, but softened like the world is blinking itself awake. You look down. The braid on your wrist glows softly, then fades into your skin. Not gone, just part of you now. You still hold the tapestry. Its weight is gentle, purposeful. You walk forward, no fanfare, no crowds, just the world waiting quietly to remember. You unfold the tapestry, not to show, not yet, but to look, to see what they gave you. It isn't flawless. There are knots, frayed edges, places where the thread doubled back in panic or grief. But it's whole, and it's true. You sit beneath a tree, one of those quiet, wide ones that shelter and never ask why. And you begin to write on the blank page Medea gave you, with words pulled from gardens and looms and wells and letters never sent. You don't try to correct their stories. You just listen and let them speak in your voice now, because they weren't myths. They were women, and they were lonely, not because they were unloved, but because they were unheard. Until now. Now that you've made it here, there's no need to hurry back. Let the weight of the tapestry rest in your lap. Feel its warmth, how it pulses, faintly, like a memory with a heartbeat. The air around you is soft, no longer heavy with history, but feathered with the hush of understanding. The tree behind you creaks gently, not in warning, but in rhythm, like it too has listened to these stories and found a kind of peace in holding them. Breathe in the scent of thread and earth, of ink and roses and cool stone corridors. Breathe out and feel the quiet settle deeper into your bones. The kind of quiet that doesn't erase, but remembers. The moon is rising now, slow round unbothered. You watch its light catch in the folds of your tapestry, and for a moment it looks like it's glowing. Maybe it is. Let your eyes fall gently closed now. You've carried their stories well, and they've carried you too, in return. Whatever waits for you when you wake, let it find you softened, curious, and ready. Because somewhere in the space between myth and truth, a thread is always waiting to be picked up again. And now you know exactly how to begin. Good night.